We're in Joshua chapter 1. If you want to go ahead and turn to Joshua chapter 1. We're in the book of Joshua. I think one of the things that we sometimes focus on is the fact that books like Joshua are books of history, but they're not only books of history. You have 12 books of history that contain history, but they also contain pre-pictures and shadows of what is to come, and there's prophecy in that. There's just a whole lot of going on that's not necessarily just a historical account of something. We look at a narrative in the Old Testament, and sometimes we just tell that story, and we tell that story to our kids, and the kids are probably even learning some Old Testament stories somewhere tonight in one of our classes. And great stories, and sometimes I think we move forward into adulthood thinking that's really all they are, is great stories. But when you look at the book of Exodus, there is this understanding that there is a Redeemer, Deliverer coming. Moses is that picture of the one who will come and deliver from slavery, deliver from that bondage. And the Leviticus is about being holy, making sure that you have relationship with God by being holy and following His will and doing the things He says. And Deuteronomy is about the obeying the law and doing the right thing and being ready when you're called to enter that promised land. So you have, by the way, even Numbers has. Sometimes we skip Numbers because it's hard to read, but even Numbers is about the wandering of the children of Israel because of their faithlessness. So if you are faithless, then you're not going to be able to enter into the promised land. And so there's all of this blending together of all these stories that are more than just stories. It's a blending of the message of God that's telling us about what's coming and what is yet to be. And the book of Joshua is a lot of that same thing, because it's a book about redemption. It's a book about people who enter into the promised land, and they are redeemed. They are fresh. They are new. They are eager to enter into this promised land that God has given them. By the way, it's kind of this juxtaposition of, you look at their forefathers who were faithless, who were complainers, and they didn't get to enter into the promised land. And then you have this new generation who comes, and there is this eagerness and willingness to be able to follow God's will and do what God said to enter the promised land, because God didn't say anything different. He didn't say it's going to be easier this time. He said to the first generation, you go in and take the land that I've already given you. Just go in and take it. It's already yours. Just go in and take it. Well, this next generation had the same demands made upon them, which was, you go in and take the land that I've already given you. And if your forefathers just listened to me, you'd already be there. You would have been born there, but they didn't listen. So it's about redemption. It's about God's promise being fulfilled. It's about God's ability and power to deliver that promise that He made. It's all about, even though mankind rebelled and didn't do what God said do, God's plan still went through. He was able to carry that out. So the framework of the book of Joshua is about these people entering into the promised land, being led by Joshua. By the way, his very name, Savior, is obviously a pre-picture of what is to come. He replaces Moses, who can't lead the people in. And by the way, there's another one. If you fail to obey God, you don't enter the promised land, even if your name's Moses. That's pretty strong there. Moses makes it to it. He even prepares the people for it, but he can't enter. And it's because of his lack of obedience to God. So Joshua leads the people in, and so you've got this continual typology or foreshadowing, whatever you want to call it, because you have this series of events that leads the Israelites now being led by Joshua to the door of the promised land, and Joshua is ready to bring the people into that promised land, and it's a fulfillment of that promise as you have the people there ready to enter in and go in and not be turned away this time because of the faithlessness that I'm sure they were reminded of as they were walking and as they were moving through the wilderness to get to that promised land again. So God is calling for people of faith to enter in this promised land, and he continually reminds them, especially Joshua here, be strong and very courageous. That kind of, I guess if you were kind of giving a name to the book of Joshua, it would include that, be strong and courageous, but it's especially the context of this first chapter, be strong and very courageous, because 3 times God is going to tell Joshua to be strong and very courageous. So let's consider the book of Joshua then, chapter 1, and we need to read 1 through 9. Somebody want to read that for us? Joshua 1 through 9.
After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' age, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I am about to give to them, to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, and from the great river, the Euphrates, all the Hittite country, to the great sea on the west. No one will be able to stand up against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their forefathers to give them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Do not let this book of the law depart from your mouth. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go.
Good, thanks. Wow, when you read those first 9 verses, doesn't that kind of make you want to go out there and do something? Because he really tries to, or is inspiring Joshua in what's about to take place. Moses has died. The Lord comes to Joshua and says, you are now going to lead the children of Israel into the promised land. Moses is no longer going to be the leader. You're going to be the leader. Now imagine that one. Now, I understand that he was all along being prepared to take Moses' place. He was Moses' assistant. He was with him. It seems that there was a lot of duties that Joshua performed during this time of the leading the children of Israel out of the bondage in Egypt and through the wandering of the wilderness. Seems that Joshua must have been a very significant help to Moses during that time. But I think Joshua, maybe he wasn't expecting it to come as soon as it actually did. But God says, it's time. You are now going to be the leader. You're going to lead my people just as Moses led my people. You're going to be that leader. But you're going to complete the mission that Moses couldn't complete. He couldn't complete it. So you, Joshua, now it's your turn. It's time for you to finish the task of getting my people into the promised land. So God charges Joshua. Verse 3 through 7, he gives him a charge. And there are several things that are very similar to what God has talked to Moses about at different times. But just as it was with Moses, I'm going to be with you. Just as he did with Moses, I promise to give you every piece of land upon which your feet touch. That kind of promise, that same kind of promise. So there's the encouragement to Joshua that just like I was with Moses, I'm going to be with you. The same promise that I had before when Moses was leading the children of Israel, it's still going to be fulfilled. The same promise of entering into the promised land, claiming that land for your possession, it's still in place. And everywhere you go, every place that your foot touches is going to be that land that I will give you, the same promise that he gave to Moses. Nobody's going to be able to stand against you, no matter what army, no matter what force, no matter what walls or cities. It doesn't matter what giants you face. Remember the reasons that the 10 spies gave as to why we can't defeat them, why we can't enter the promised land? Pretty much, God takes care of every one of those. It doesn't matter if it's a walled city or if there are giants there or if they have a large army. None of that matters, because just as I was with Moses, I will be with you. I will never leave you. I will not forsake you. And you just have to depend upon me. Being strong and courageous doesn't mean you bow up your back and you doggedly enter into the fray of the battle. Being strong and courageous means you have enough faith to depend upon God. That's strong and courageous, isn't it? To be able to walk into this foreign land that's their land, it's the promised land, to be able to walk in there and look at, for instance, the walled city of Jericho. To be strong and courageous means I'm going to do what God said. I'm going to be strong and courageous in the Lord. I'm going to do what He says, even though I don't understand it. Yeah, we're going to walk around this city 13 times, and the walls are going to fall. We're going to do what He said. So being strong and courageous was not gathering his gumption or getting together his ability to fight or being prepared for battle, as much as it was about doing what God said, because the basis of what God charges Joshua to be is faithful to Him. Do my will, adhere to my will, make sure that you know it and do it. Be strong and courageous. Trust me. Trust me, because I have already given you this land. Now, if you go all the way back to Numbers 13, you remember that when they spied out this land for the first time, Joshua was one of those. Joshua and Caleb came back with this attitude that we can do it. That's what God means. You need that attitude that you had back then 40 years ago. 40 years ago, you believed in me. 40 years ago, you knew that God had said, this is your land, and if you have that same kind of faith, that same kind of understanding of my presence with you, then you'll be successful. And I really think that's what he's talking about when he says be strong and courageous. He's not as much talking about mustering up your own as he is about depending on me. Make sure that you know the book of the law, that it is in your mouth, that you meditate on it day and night. Make sure that you're careful to do all that is written in it, and only then will you be prosperous. See that? When will they be prosperous? When will they succeed? Only when the book is in his life and it's incorporated in his life, his actions, his mind, his thoughts, and everything that he does. And as a result of that, then he can walk up to the walls of Jericho with no fear. Doesn't have to. All right, give me some observations. We're really only through about verse 5, but we'll come back and make some more observations. But what do you see there in verses 1 through 5?
Well, verse 2 and 3 says, whenever you cross the Jordan, and all this people to the land which I'm giving to you, the sons of Israel, and every place where you put treads, it's yours. You know, just when you, just like I think today, we're going to the promised land, and all we got to do is just believe it's just given to us. Nothing we have to do again. We just walk in and inside. We go and start taking over. We just go in and walk into free citadels, and, you know, and palaces, and this doesn't we have to do.
Yeah. Well, and what's
that's the philosophy of the religious world out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but look what all they had to do to get that free land. Get that land God just gave them.
Right.
We're given salvation, but you know we got to cross the Jordan.
Right.
We got to get into the water. You know.
Well, and then they had to walk around the walls 13 times, which I mean, it's not by human ingenuity. We could talk a long time about that. It's not what our common sense says or human ingenuity. It's what God says, no matter what He says. It may not make sense. It may not. None of it may be according to human deduction, because marching around the walls of Jericho makes no sense unless you just trust in God.
You know, one of the guys kept telling me you have to have courage because you're going to be fighting war after war after 7 years. They were fighting wars and they conquered the land. And you know, all our lives we're fighting a spiritual war.
And as a result of that knowledge that God has about how difficult it's going to be, Joshua has to have faith in God and how it's going to turn out, or he's going to give up. He's going to quit. And by the way, Randy brings this up, but one of the reasons they were fighting so long, and one of the reasons that it was the mess that it became, was that they didn't do things the way God said do them. Immediately, I mean, you're pretty soon into this whole thing, you have this disaster with Achan and his taking the things that were supposed to be dedicated to the Lord and burying them in his tent, and there's disaster and defeat in battle, which never was supposed to happen. God said, it's yours, I'm going to give it to you, I'm with you, and you're not going to be defeated as long as I'm with you. But wait a minute, Achan took some of that was dedicated to the Lord, garments, gold, the silver, that kind of thing, buried it in his tent. They're defeated. And that was something that continued to be an issue, was those who did not obey him.
I was not going to let Moses go in the promised land. But when you read the 6th word in verse 2, it says, Moses, my sword, 7th word, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then. We're ready to go now.
Yep. That part of our history is over. We're moving on. Yeah. That's a good observation.
Well, the thing about it is, he's telling, you know, not only did I tell Moses I was going to give this to you, this has been even from Abraham.
Yes.
It's all the way back. I've been promising. This is going to be the home of the Israelites. This is yours. All you've got to do is listen and obey. But even when they got old, I said, well, I don't need somebody else.
Yeah, that's okay. I've already done it, so. But yes, you're right. This was not just something that was promised to Moses, though this is the focus here because Moses was leading them to this point. Dale is correct in talking about that all the way back to the time of Abraham, this was promised to them then, and they had this opportunity, and they didn't take advantage of the opportunity. So he emphasizes be strong and courageous. If you're going to inherit my promises, specifically this big promise of the land, then verse 7 specifically, be strong and courageous. I'm going to be with you. He's already promised that through verse 5, but verse 7. And notice, let's just look at that specifically because he connects be strong and courageous in verse 7. Be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the law that Moses, my servant, commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. Now, I think there's a connection there between the strong and courageous and the fact that he's to remain within the commandments of the Lord, not to turn from the right or to the left, to depend upon him, do right, be right, think right. And as a result of that, then the courage and the strength is going to be in the Lord because he knows where that strength comes from. Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly. Yeah.
And what the goal is, and that's it.
Yes.
You don't have to add to it or do anything else.
Yeah. Not to the right or to the left. You stay in the book. Yeah.
We're commanded the same thing.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, 3 times in Scripture it gives us that same idea. Yeah.
And you can look at another thing on the be strong and courageous to this point, when he talks about the law. Be strong and courageous, and you prod these folks, these people, into obeying my law. Don't let them move you either way.
All right. Yeah, that's a great point. And as we work through Joshua, one of the things you're going to see is that he has the courage to stand firm even in the times of struggle, when things aren't going well. Joshua hangs in there. And when everybody turns against God or turns away from God, one of the things he says, you guys need to decide. If you're going to serve the gods of the Amorites, then you go ahead. But you need to make a decision. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. I think there too, as Dale brings up, that is one of those things that he's going to have to be very strong and courageous in, and that is standing for what's right. And that's what he says here in chapter 1. You stand firmly in my word, in my will. Don't turn from the left or the right. You're the leader. And obviously, one of the things that leaders experience is that everybody's not going to follow you. And they didn't. But what's interesting is that when you finish it all, the folks were faithful for a time after that. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Sure, exactly. Well, he continues that thought in verse 8 when he says, the book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it, for then you'll make your way prosperous, and then you'll have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Don't be frightened. Do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. So as we work our way up through verse 9, one of the things that is, I think, highlighted, obviously, is that third time there in verse 9 that he says to Joshua, be strong and courageous. But then he adds, do not be, and depending on your translation, the ESV says, do not be frightened, do not be dismayed. I think other translations, do not be fearful, maybe something like that. But it communicates the same thing. There's really no difference, because he says, be strong and be courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be frightened. Do not be afraid. Do not be fearful. But make sure that you obey all that God has given you to obey, all of the law. Make sure you do that. And as a result of that, then, you will have success. He talks about prosper or success, or you will. He doesn't come right out and use a word for it necessarily, but the idea of success is ingrained in all of this, because he's talking about being successful in obtaining the promised land, being successful. So how are you going to be successful? There's this pattern that he gives, and it's very simple. It's a very simple process, and that is, make sure that you follow the law. Make sure that you have it not only read and understood, but you meditate on it continually. You employ that in the way that you act, and you trust in God because you know Him. You trust in Him. Therefore, do not be fearful. Do not be afraid. Be very strong and courageous, the opposite of fearful and afraid. And so that's God's charge to Joshua in those first 9 verses. Now, anything else before we move on? God's calling for Joshua to have whatever he has now as far as the faith in him. He's calling for him to dig deeper. He's calling for him to have that deep faith, that deep trust, that deep understanding of his word, so that when he is challenged, he does not turn away. And he's going to be challenged. I can't imagine walking up to a wall that's 40 feet high and 40 feet thick, and you have soldiers standing on top of that in places. Yeah, with chariots, yeah. I can't imagine that. It seems like a task that it's just not going to happen. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. You're following this great leader, Moses, yeah. Okay, look at verses 10 through 18 then. Joshua addresses the people, and he's going to communicate to them. He assumes command, and he's going to communicate now to the people through the rest of the chapter, all the way through verse 18. Dale, you want to read those 10 through 18 for us?
Ordered the officers of the people, go to the camp and tell the people, get your supplies ready. 3 days from now you will cross the Jordan here to go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you for your own. But to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said, remember the command that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you. The Lord your God is giving you rest and is granting you this land. Your wives, your children, and your livestock may stay in the land that Moses gave you east of the Jordan. But all your fighting men, fully armed, must cross over ahead of your brothers. You are to help your brothers until the Lord gives them rest, as he has done for you, and until they too have taken possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving them. After that, you may go back and occupy your own land, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you east of the Jordan toward the sunrise. Then they answered Joshua, "Whatever you have commanded us, we will do, and wherever you send us, we will go. Just as we fully obeyed Moses, so we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. Whoever rebels against your word and does not obey your words, whatever you may command them will be put to death. Only be strong and courageous." Again.
Very good. Okay, a lot of these verses are about those 2.5 tribes that have been given the land east of the Jordan River. So just to sum that up, Moses had promised them that land that was on the east side of the Jordan, not on the west side of the Jordan where they were now about to enter in and conquer. They're going to do that in 3 days. So Moses communicates that to them. So what he reminds them of is that, yes, you're going to get that. You're going to have rest there. But before that rest comes, one of the things that has to happen is that your fighting men must be a part of this conquering of the promised land, this area of Palestine, this land that had been promised to them. Your fighting men must be a part of this conquering of the land until it's conquered. And then they can come back and enjoy this rest there in the land east of the Jordan. So that's the part about a large part of that, verse 12 and I think through 15, something like that. So it begins in verses 10 and 11. He says, you prepare your provisions. What do they call that in the Army? When they come in and tell you to, isn't there a name for it? Get ready to move, pack everything up, get ready to move. I guess there's not a name for it. Yeah. Is there not? Oh, you can't say it in church? Okay. Yeah. Get your stuff together. That's what they said. So in 3 days, we're going to cross over the Jordan. We're going to take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. Now that's a great verse there, verse 11. Gather everything together, get your provisions, because we're crossing the Jordan, and what we're crossing to do is to take possession of the land that the Lord your God's given you. Matter of fact statement, there's no quibbling about that. What Joshua says is, it is ours. All we have to do is cross over and claim it. And then he talks about the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half tribe of Manasseh. And then he says, once he finished talking about that, they began to answer him, verse 16. All that you've commanded us, we will do. Wherever you send us, we will go. Just as we obeyed Moses in all things, so we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. Anybody who rebels against your commandment and disobeys your words, whatever you command him will be put to death. Only be strong and courageous. Well, that's quite a commitment, isn't it? Everything you say, we will do. Wherever you send us, we will go. We will never disobey, and if anybody does disobey you, what's going to be the result of that? May he be put to death. Be strong and courageous. Exactly. Yes. There could not be a better confirmation of Joshua's leadership than this statement right here. I mean, can you think of anything else that needs to be said? Whatever you say we're going to do, wherever you tell us to go, we're going to go. And if anybody doesn't like that, if anybody disobeys or contradicts your orders, then let them be put to death. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. We're not talking about a company of soldiers here. So that's quite a statement as Joshua takes the reins of leadership. He stands and tells the people what's about to happen. Obviously, well, I say obviously, but evidently there has been some kind of communication to the people that Joshua is now in charge. I'm not sure how that went about or what happened there. But obviously they are aware now that Joshua is the leader. Moses is gone, Joshua is the leader, and so now you have this this confirmation of Joshua's leadership and the response of the people to Joshua's leadership, which is total commitment, 100% total commitment without any question whatsoever. And they further encouraged Joshua, just like God did. Do you find that interesting? God said, be strong and courageous. God said, be strong and courageous. God said, be strong and courageous. And when the people affirm Joshua's leadership, they tell him, be strong and courageous. That's the kind of leader we want. We want one that's strong and courageous, the Savior of the people. I guess that's a good place to stop. I think our time is just about up, but as we think about the conclusion of all of this, I think one of the things that obviously we see is that in Joshua's leadership, one of the things that God emphasized was the fact that he needed to know the law and obey the law of God, that is. To be strong and courageous, obviously, is one of those things that he repeats himself and says that 3 times. Obviously, that is a very significant part of that. And trust in him and failing to trust in God would result in defeat. They're not going to get the land. Just like their forefathers didn't get the land if they don't trust him. The result would be the same. All right, we'll begin probably chapter 2 next week. We may move quickly through that one, but we'll move to chapter 2 and 3 next week. I appreciate your comments.